Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So hello everyone, and welcome to Basics Discussion Circle and Meditation. My name's Travis. So tonight's topic, we'll be talking a little bit about mindfulness. I'm not sure what aspects exactly. Mindfulness is actually a pretty deep topic. It has a lot of facets to it. But we'll get into that in a little bit. First, before I get started, I enjoyed last week. I had asked you to kind of type in whatever it is that you're sitting with today, whatever seems to be the dominant emotion in the mind, to just type that in the chat below. Just kind of check in, take note of what we're sitting with, so we can notice if it comes up during the meditation, and we can notice the state it's in after the meditation. Roberto says acceptance. I'm glad to hear that, man. Acceptance can go a long way. I would say it's definitely an emotion. It has some emotion to it, that's for sure. Janie said they're at Sunset Cliffs, listening to the waves. So peace. Wonderful. So with mindfulness, and I'll talk a bit, but you can still comment below, take note of what you're feeling. With mindfulness, oftentimes in the West, within Buddhism, mindfulness has gotten kind of reduced down to what psychology refers to as mindfulness, which is just this accepting awareness. But mindfulness is a lot more than just that. So I have a couple sutras, and I left the link in the description below, but I have them here. I wanted to just kind of read a little bit from one of them. So this comes from the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutra. It's a really fundamental sutra in Buddhism. Highly recommend reading it. In the description, I left a link to it. I also recommend reading different translations of it, because different translations have different commentary. They've taken different things out of it. So this little bit here, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and distress, for the attainment of the proper method, and for the realization of freedom. In other words, the establishings of mindfulness. There is the case where one remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. They remain focused on feelings, mind, mental qualities, in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. So with that, there's a few important bits of that. The actual sutra is much longer. That's just an excerpt from it. There's a few important bits there. The first one is the phrasing, one remains ardent, alert, and mindful. This is the description that the Buddha gave when asked to explain what right mindfulness was. He gave that ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. One remains focused on the body or the breath in and of itself. So alertness is what we typically think of when we hear mindfulness. And these three, ardent, alert, and mindful, are the three sub-factors that constitute right mindfulness. So alertness is what we typically think of with mindfulness. It's this awareness of what's happening in the present moment. And then you have ardent or ardency, which is this quality of sticking with what's happening, staying here. So you're aware of what's happening, and when the mind starts to waver, you bring it back. You reaffirm it in this moment. But then you have mindfulness in this context actually means something very different from what we typically think of as mindfulness. Mindfulness is a quality of active memory. So it's the word sati, the word that we translated into mindfulness, is a really nuanced word. And as with a lot of Pali words, which is ancient Indian, they have a lot of different meanings, and it's hard to get that meaning across into English. So the word sati means to keep in mind. So it doesn't mean bare awareness, but it means to keep in mind. So it's this quality of the active memory. It's keeping in mind things that will be useful in the moment, that will be useful in the meditation. So you remain alert of what's happening in the present moment. You have that ardency, which keeps you here. And then you have mindfulness, which references past experiences within the meditation or past methods that you can apply to the meditation. This is kind of what we did last week, where I suggested playing with different perceptions. And you were only able to play with those different perceptions because of this active memory, because you had learned about those different kinds of perceptions previously, and you were able to apply them on the present moment. And that's mindfulness within the context of the Pali Canon, the core Buddhist text of Theravada. So it's this quality of keeping in mind what works and what doesn't, and being able to apply it within the moment. So with that, we'll get started with a meditation. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Then notice the way that you're breathing. You can experiment with different lengths of breath, different intensities of breathing, maybe even deeper breaths or more shallow, heavier or lighter. If you feel somewhat sluggish, trying to breathe in a way that's energizing. And if you're feeling anxious, trying to find a breath that soothes the nerves, that's calming. I found that a long inhale with a short exhale tends to really get the blood flowing. It's very energizing. And slower breathing tends to work good for anxiety. Just noticing what works best for you. When you've found a breath that the body responds well to in this moment, you can begin to work that throughout the body. Letting this breath, this awareness, this energy flow down through the arms and down through the legs, out to the tips of the fingers and the toes. keeping in mind that our duty here is to fill the body with our awareness, to nourish the body with the breath. Energizing any parts that feel starved, and relaxing any parts that feel tense. As you're spreading the breath through the body, if you notice any blockages, you can think of the breath flowing through the blockage, dissolving it away all the way through the in-breath, dissolving it away all the way through the out-breath. So that everything's open and flowing freely through the body. You recognize that the mind is wander. You can release your hold on the distraction, not pushing it away, but just releasing. Notice any tension that built up from that distraction and relax it, settling back into this full body awareness. And as you maintain this breath-centered body awareness, check in with the mind. Notice whatever emotion you may have mentioned at the beginning. Look at it with the eyes of a meditator. Look at it from the foundation of this full-bodied awareness. Noticing if the perspective of it has shifted, or if it's revealed something underneath. There's no need right now to try to figure anything out or dismantle anything. Just to be aware of it, to acknowledge it. Sometimes things just need a spotlight on them for them to make sense, for them to tire themselves out. So see if you can physically soften into this sensation of it. Expanding your awareness back out again to fill the entire body. From the crown of the head all the way to the soles of the feet. Taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Slowly opening the eyes and beginning to stretch if needed. Taking these few minutes to reflect back on this past session. To any time the mind felt particularly settled or relaxed. And reflecting back on what you were doing and how you were perceiving just before that relaxation came, just before that focus came. And saving it for later, saving it in your active memory. So if anyone has any thoughts or comments on the meditation, or if anyone would like to share something they may have noticed when they dug a little deeper. One of those 3 qualities I mentioned in the beginning, ardency. Another translation for it, I believe the Pali is atapa. Another translation for it is investigation. So mindfulness recalls what we learned from the past, brings it to bear on the present moment. Alertness is aware of the activities of the mind and body within the present moment. And ardency digs deeper into what's happening in this present moment, what's happening in the mind. And those 3 qualities together constitute right mindfulness. It's only when you bring all 3 to bear on the present moment that we start to get an idea of the shape of the mind. Jessica had shared at the beginning they were experiencing some restlessness. And then they shared again, they noticed that they're covering up and pushing away fatigue by using restlessness. It's important to get enough sleep. The meditation's not a substitute for sleep. Believe me. So it's really, I love that you noticed that that the restlessness was actually just covering up fatigue. Oftentimes that's the way that the hindrances work. These qualities of mind that weigh the mind down, bog the mind down. They'll often, we've gotten really good throughout our lives at using one hindrance to cover up another hindrance. The one that comes to mind most would be like sensory passion. We can use beautiful sights, sounds, tastes, tactile sensations to distract ourselves from the underlying anger or regret or anxiety. And it's really important to notice not only the most blatant hindrances in the mind, but the more subtle ones. So they're all very closely related. They play off one another. So that's wonderful. And once you notice it, you can work with it. So oftentimes just using this as an example, covering the fatigue with restlessness, if we're putting all our effort towards trying to work with the restlessness, that works to some extent, but we're still left with the fatigue. But by finding out that the restlessness is actually coming from fatigue, we can concentrate our efforts on overcoming that fatigue itself. And then you kill two birds. I don't want to say kill, but you kill two birds with one stone. It's important. It's definitely important. Janie shared that they were having a hard time kind of staying alert or staying fully awake, it sounds like, because their head was bobbing, dropping a bit. And it's when I first started this practice, one of the hardest things to learn was how to use the meditation to actually give me more energy, to actually energize me. Because when I first started practicing, I would do longer sits, and I thought it was all about tranquility all the time. And I was just supposed to get as settled as possible. But what ends up happening when you're trying to get as settled as possible, if you don't energize yourself first, if you don't get things moving first, all you're doing is meditating yourself to sleep. And that would happen very often for me. Oftentimes I would think that I was in like really deep states of meditation or something like that, but really I had fallen asleep and I was dreaming. And those deep states of meditation were dreams, which in some sense, I guess that you could call dreams meditation, but I'm not even going to go there. But it was an interesting process of learning that the way that I breathe, the way that I visualize the breath, the way that I perceive of breath through body could actually give me more energy. Could actually fill the body with energy. That was something interesting to learn how to do, and learn how to maintain. And it just takes practice. And it all starts with that thought of just posing the question in the mind, what kind of breathing would be the most energizing? That's why I always suggest that at the beginning, play with the breath, pose questions, pose perceptions to notice what really will settle the mind. But settle it not just straight into settling. If you're a little drowsy, you want to energize it first and then get it to settle. It's this delicate balance. Marisa said that I could feed 2 birds with 1 scone. I love that. I'm going to try to remember that. So with the mindfulness, the topic, I had mentioned that it's that quality of active memory. And I wanted to that can be kind of a surprising statement for a lot of people, especially people who've been involved with like mindfulness-based stress reduction and things like that, where mindfulness is this very specific thing of kind of this broad accepting awareness, where this form of mindfulness that I'm talking about is more of that active memory of being able to bring things together to bear on the moment and have a sense of a directed intention and directed willpower to accomplish certain things in the moment. Because when we're sitting here, the way that I lead the meditation, when we're sitting here, we're not just sitting here watching the breath. We're sitting here working with the breath. We're working the breath through the body. We're expanding our awareness to fill the entire body. A quote by the Buddha, if you want to call it that I really enjoy, that kind of reflects this full-bodied awareness to me, is if you have a lump of salt and you put it in a glass of water and you taste the water, it's insanely salty. If you have a lump of salt and you drop it in a river and you taste the river, you won't even notice the salt. And for me, that's very reflective of how this full-bodied meditation is. When we have these little things, these things happen to us and we're all up in our head and we're this little orb in the center of our head, basically, as far as our awareness is concerned most of the time. We're just kind of this little orb of awareness up in the head that's piloting this body. But when we fully embody the body, we work the breath through the body, these things that seem to come in and just completely consume our awareness seem a lot less overwhelming because we have a sturdier foundation here. We're not this little orb getting blown around by the winds. We're this full-bodied awareness, this strong foundation. And that's really helped me a lot. Things can come in, and instead of just attacking directly into my head, they come in through the body, and there's a lot more that can be done with it, a lot more that can be worked with through the body. So we get out of our head by getting into the body. So this quality of mindfulness, I wanted to read another one. And again, the sutra is linked below. This is called the Fortress Sutra, or the Fortress Sutta. It's one of my favorites. It goes through different qualities of mind, but it compares them to a frontier fortress back in the time of the Buddha. So it compares different prerequisites of a fortress, like its supplies of food, its walls, its army, its weapons, and all sorts of things. It compares them with different qualities of mind. And in the sutra, mindfulness is compared to a gatekeeper. So I'd like to just read this portion of the sutra. It's a much longer sutra than this too, but this is my favorite part of it. Just as the royal frontier fortress has a gatekeeper, wise, competent, intelligent, to keep out those they don't know and to let in those they do, for the protection of those within and to ward off those without. In the same way, a disciple of the noble ones is mindful, endowed with excellent proficiency in mindfulness, remembering and able to call to mind even things that were done and said long ago. With mindfulness as their gatekeeper, the disciple of the noble ones abandons what is unskillful, develops what is skillful, abandons what is blameworthy, and develops what is blameless. They look after themselves with ease. So that sutta right there clearly defines mindfulness, and this is in the words of the Buddha, defines mindfulness as a quality that's discerning. The gatekeeper doesn't just openly accept whoever comes up to the gates. It keeps in mind whether this person or this mental quality that comes up to the gates or to our consciousness, it keeps in mind what kind of impact it's had in the past. And we know from our own trial and error of however many years we've been alive, we have certain qualities of mind that often can convince us they're our friend, but then in practice and application, they cause a lot of damage, or they leave a lot of damage in their wake. So this quality of mindfulness is actually this wisdom quality of keeping in mind what is beneficial and what is harmful. So when a quality comes into mind, say something like anger, and we try to spin it into righteous anger or motivating anger, we can recall in the past when we've been motivated by anger, we're typically not seeing things clearly, and we typically cause more harm than good. Maybe we accomplished our goal with our anger, but we left damage in our wake. So it's this, mindfulness is this quality of keeping in mind the benefits and drawbacks of certain qualities of mind when they come up in the meditation. When you have a skillful quality come up in the meditation, mindfulness remembers that it's useful, and that this ardency and this alertness fosters it, brings it into being. So that's pretty much, I could keep talking, but that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on. If anyone has any questions about anything I just said, I'd be happy to answer some questions. So Jessica asked, what are some ways you use the breath to stay ardent? So in terms of being Jessica and Marisa asked what I think are kind of similar questions. Marisa asked, will you please talk more about energizing breaths? The one that I mentioned in the beginning, the long in-breath and quick out-breath was wonderful. Are there any others? So both of these questions have to do with breath, so I'll answer them together. So with the energizing breath, it's not just how you're physically breathing, it's also how you perceive the breath. So the long in and quick out really tends to get the heart pumping quite a bit, and it gets everything flowing. But there's also ways of perceiving in the mind that the mind kind of equates with energy. So perceiving the breath, one thing I really like doing, and I don't know if it's just because I grew up watching like the Avatar cartoon or something like that, but I enjoy imagining the breath as different kinds of elements. When I'm low on energy, I imagine it like an electricity flowing through the body. So wherever, when you're spreading the breath through the body, I imagine kind of electricity flowing through the nerves, animating the nerves, energizing the body. And just holding that perception that the breath has that ability to do that will kind of convince the mind that it does, and will actualize it. It'll bring it into existence. It'll make it something that the breath is capable of doing, because you believe that it's something that the breath is capable of doing. So part of it is perception. Part of it is our own opinions that we have about the breath. If the breath is something that's just coming in and out of the nose, you're really limiting yourself. But if it's this energy flow throughout the entire body, oxygen animates the nerves, fills the blood vessels, the entire surface of the skin is breathing through the pores. So if you change how you perceive of breath, breath can more easily be worked through the body, and you can even tweak that perception, as I mentioned, imagining it as different elements through the body. This last Monday, I released an elements meditation with similar premise. Like if you're cold, you can imagine the breath as fire or sunlight flowing through the body. If you're warm, you can imagine it as snow. Just these different perceptions applied to the breath can make a huge difference in your felt experience of the breathing, and in the impact that the breath has on the body and on the mind. Then in terms of using the breath to stay ardent, alert, and mindful, so ardency, rather than using the breath to stay ardent, you use ardency to stay with the breath. So ardency is this quality. Awareness is or alertness is what maintains this awareness. And then ardency is what digs deeper. And all those things that I just mentioned of experimenting with different ways of breathing, different perceptions of breath, those are all qualities of ardency. They're qualities of ardency that eventually become qualities of mindfulness, because you've tried them out, you've noticed that they've worked, and then you've made a note of it for later. So you're building up a skill set in the meditation. You're building up your meditation portfolio. So that's this quality of ardency, is actually penetrating deeper, questioning not only the breath, but how we perceive the breath, how we work with the breath, and any preconceived beliefs that we have about the breath, seeing when they can be limiting and when they can be freeing. So, any other questions about Buddhist practice, about the breath, anything else? So Jessica asked shared that they used to smoke, and wondering if I have any suggestions on helping the lungs feel like they can take a full deep breath without so much effort. So I can only speak so much on this because I don't necessarily have respiratory issues. But oftentimes when I am struggling when I'm struggling to get enough oxygen. For me, for example, if I've just exercised or something like that, I'm breathing very heavily and it feels like the lungs can't keep up. What I find the most useful is to remember that perception I mentioned earlier about how the entire body is actually breathing in through the pores, and to focus less on the breathing in through the lungs and more on this whole body breathing. Just imagining that the body, instead of the lungs, the entire body is expanding and contracting with the breath. And that kind of helps us focus, because it actually is possible to feel, with enough practice, it's possible to feel sensation of pores breathing if you're attempting to. So with enough practice of imagining with each in and out breath that the entire body is involved in that process, and that the entire body is expanding and contracting, it helps pick up some of the slack of the lungs. It helps take some of the pressure off of them. So if the entire body is involved with the breathing process, there's less strain. And at the same time, remembering that whether or not you focus on it, the breaths will come in and out, and there's no need to force anything. That can help a bit too. It's just about relaxing around that process and allowing it to be as it will be. That can help quite a bit. So with that, if there's no other burning questions, we'll close. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's wonderful sitting with y'all. We'll close with a transfer of merit. So if comfortable, please join palms. May any merit gained from this meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings be healthy, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upekha sangha teya cetasa jaturi sambaratva viharati samba buddharo bhavena sabba dhammaro bhavena sabba sangharo bhavena sote hantu nirantaram.